we've got a bit of intro text as well. So there's like, you know, and again, you could always just do the fail safe of winking at me and I can try and waffle on for a bit longer.
Well, I mean, so Maya's actually got the first bit, which is talking about the project itself. So I can always step in and do her bit.
Okay.
So it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Shall I just start letting people in then? Because it's 1 minute to.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Got someone gate crashing the meeting.
Oh, morning, Joyce.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Morning, Joyce, and at least
Hi,
you sound okay this morning.
Oh, hurrah! For those not in the know, I sometimes sound like a robot.
You do. A very drunk robot.
It does. It gives me great joy every day.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We're just letting everyone in, so just bear with us.
Morning, everybody. If anybody wants to put in the chat where they're from, it's always lovely to watch all the parts of the country we're joining from. Oh, somebody else from Pathhead, one of my neighbours.
Orkney and Shetland.
I think the furthest away we've had is Ireland. Is that correct, Cara?
I think so. I'm trying to think if we had someone from Spain.
So possibly someone from the Netherlands as well.
Yeah, yeah. We should do a point cloud, not a cloud, what's they called? Word cloud, showing where everyone's from.
Well, we have 160 people signed up today, so let's see the furthest away. Jedburgh.
Shetland as well.
Herefordshire. Hello, Annie.
St Andrews, is there much snow left in St Andrews, or is it melting away on the coast?
It's kind of melting away, to be honest. It's quite bad in Cooper. Cooper's kind of in the middle of Fife, but St Andrews kind of melting away a little more. The side streets are quite bad, but the main streets are pretty fine, to be honest.
Quite strong in Leven still, though, for snow.
Not sure if there's more forecast around the country.
I see we've got Malawi, Humphreys Jalafi from Malawi. Rosie, that's got to be the record.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Time is it in Malawi?
Early.
Early. Okay, we're just getting started, everyone. Anyone who's just joined us? Okay, I think I'll get started, everyone, if that's okay. Brilliant. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. It's lovely. It's just lovely seeing where everyone's from. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our third event in our series of Scotland's Community Heritage Conversations. My name is Cara, and on behalf of the organising committee, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you who have signed up today. I'll start off by saying that today we're joined by our BSL interpreters, Donna Jewell and Jill Gallagher. If you would like BSL interpretations throughout the event, please do put that in the chat bar and we can connect to you. A huge thanks to Historic Environment Scotland for funding that directly today. So it's February, and I was reflecting this week that with all the snowy weather, if this was an in-person event, I imagine that the organising committee would have had to have an emergency meeting to debate if the event could have gone ahead. But instead we're at home, hopefully warm and cosy, and perhaps still in our pyjamas, some of you maybe perhaps, ready to hear all about youth empowerment. For those of you who haven't been able to make our previous two events, but are regulars to the community conference, we're so happy that you are here today joining us. And for those of you who are about to experience the event for the very first time, I want to welcome you and help you enjoy the event as much as we do. This event is brought to you by a partnership of heritage organisations, Archaeology Scotland, Chartered Institute for Archaeologists, Council for Scottish Archives, the Community Heritage Alliance, Historic Environment Scotland and Northlight Heritage. But what really makes this event unique, it is a platform for you to share your stories of your projects and your heritage. And as you would notice, our event has now gone digital, but this has allowed us to expand beyond our traditional one weekend event. And our next event will be taking place on Wednesday, the 17th of March, and it will be based around the theme of health and well-being. So if you've got a project or a story to tell, do get in touch with us, the committee. We want your help to shape that event. And we'd love your input into the content of future events. So if you think there's something that we should be talking about, just let us know. I just want to run through a few housekeeping rules and the schedule for today. We are obviously in a Zoom meeting format, which will hopefully enable you to fully participate in the chat and discussion. Please do keep your mics off and cameras off unless you're speaking, so we can hopefully ensure that we have smooth running order today. We're trying 2 new things today, so bear with us if anything goes wrong. But we're going to be doing some live polling throughout the event. And we've also got some chat rooms. So at the break, we've got a break at 11:05. We're going to have some breakout rooms available. So if you'd like to catch up with someone or just have a general chat with a like-minded soul, then you can take advantage of that feature. After each talk, we will then have a live question and answer session. You can use the chat bar or the chat box to pose your questions or comments, which will be picked up by our conference colleagues. Towards the end of the event, we will have a wider discussion which you again can take part in by posing your question or thoughts in the question and answer box. And if you would like to speak in the discussion, to ask your question directly or to talk about your point directly, then let us know and we can bring you onto the digital stage to speak. And you can find the chat bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Today is being recorded, so please note that if you contribute to the discussion, either in the open session or the chat bar, it will be shared and be publicly available on the Community Heritage Alliance website. Do get in touch if you have any questions about this, or if you've contributed and have a change of heart about your contribution after the event. I know I don't need to say this to you all, but please be kind and respectful when we're asking our questions or taking part in the discussion. We want to make sure that this lovely, friendly and inclusive nature of this event continues online. So we're tweeting, our event hashtag is Celebrate SCHC, so do add your thoughts to Twitter as well. And I think that's everything. So I think we should just get started, fingers and toes crossed. Everything is going to go well today. I know it will do. For our first talk, we're going to hear from Anya, Emily, Maya and Alice about their work with the Historic Scot Youth Forum. So over to you.
Hi, yes, I'm Maya, and I'm just introducing the who we are and what we do. Yes, so our origin stories are that Historic Environment Scotland essentially wanted to kind of improve their engagement with young people, and they wanted to think about how young people could be more involved in decision making. They spoke to Young Scot and asked them to recruit a group of young people to develop ideas around. The group's been running since December 2019, but there was a second round of recruitment in September 2020 as well. We'll be publishing a final report in summer this year. Next slide, please. We're something that's really good is that the group is so mixed. You hear ideas that you never would have thought about, because even though the majority of us are from the same generation, we all have such different outlooks and life experiences and perspectives, and it's really been eye-opening to how much the sector has to gain from including more young people. We are working with other staff and volunteers, and we get to speak to HES directors as well, which is great because it really feels like you make more of a difference because we speak to the decision-making people. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Maya. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to be discussing the challenges faced by young people in the heritage sector. And for my part specifically, I'll be focusing on the work-related challenges. Now, we had discussions in our youth forum with people from HES. And in these discussions, I brought up that for myself personally, I'd like to get into the heritage and conservation sector. Now, they have degree options available for this, but when I was discussing my choices with the leaders that we were meeting, they said that this is probably not the best route to go on if you want to get into the heritage sector. The degrees specifically, you'd think if you want to get into a specific job sector, you'd choose the degree for it. But I was told that they're more looking for people who have had practical hands-on experience. Now, this is a major stumbling block for young people, as finding practical experience is quite difficult. And job security is also an issue for young people, as many of the contracts available are just seasonal. So if it comes to winter or summer, your job security is gone, really. We've also found that it's more of a who you know than what you know sector. So if you're in the industry and you know people high up in businesses, you're more likely to be able to get a job in the sector than if you don't. It's also quite intimidating for young people to enter, as many of the people already in the sector are middle-aged or in their late 30s to 40s. And as a young person, I assume you all know, it is quite uncomfortable sometimes to talk to people who are more knowledgeable than you are. So in order to combat this, we were thinking a point of contact would be helpful. So if a young person gets into the sector, they'll have a person specifically that they can go to ask any questions they have for help. There's also a lack of provision for young people at sites, and I will pass you over to Anya, who's going to discuss how to engage with young people.
Hi, so our engagement with young people, I've noticed that quite a lot of the events and things ran are targeted to either young children or adults, and there's almost a gap where you're lost when you're a teenager and there's nothing to really do. So we're thinking to combat this, there'd be things like more engagement with teenagers of said age range in the sites, as well as events that are actually targeted to older teens. And even if you can't do something in person, teens are quite often digital nowadays. Our lives are all spent on the internet, so to have social media accounts that were actually faced towards us to create a more welcoming environment, such as sites like Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok, which is a short form video site where we could post educational videos, you could do question and answers, different things like that, or like social media challenges where every time you visit a site, you could post a picture with the hashtag and collect all sites. I think that's everything. So I'll pass you on to Alice.
Hi, yeah, can I get the next slide, please? So social media is kind of only one way that we can interact with young people. This generation of young people are what we consider digital natives. We've grown up with technology. It's intrinsically part of our lives and is a space that we are drawn to. And I think there is a great need to make, whilst having physical activities and events at sites are great, and these can help people who are already there, I think there is opportunity for all of these activities and events to be supplemented with online or digital content. I personally did my dissertation on the use of gamification in the tourism and heritage sector. So that's using game-based platforms in a non-gaming setting. And my research really showed that there is a great opportunity for this. And even elements of what Anya was mentioning about challenges and rewards kind of encompasses this gamification philosophy. So something that we've been wanting to address is the need for an online platform that is specifically designed or targeted towards young people that can really get us engaged. And through online engagement, hopefully that'll lead to more physical engagement at sites. Especially with COVID at the moment, online is what we all have access to. I think as well, what an online platform allows for is us to kind of tackle one of our more difficult issues, which has been that of accessibility and making sure that everyone has equal opportunity to get to learn about their heritage and experience these amazing sites that we have access to. I think it's really a growth area. You know, technology is constantly expanding and growing, and the popularity and growth of VR and AR offer some great engagement opportunities that I think young people are willing to take on. So yeah, that's all from us today.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, all of you. What a challenge doing a sort of short presentation with all four of you as well. It was seamless, so brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone. So we've got a bit of time for some questions now. If anyone has any questions, I have a few because I loved this presentation. Okay, I will use chair's prerogative and go first. So what sort of skills, I'll start again. Mentoring is a really big thing at the moment in the heritage sector, but if you were looking for your ideal mentor, what skills and experience and knowledge would you be looking for? What do you want from us to help you in your career in heritage and archaeology? You need to become an archaeologist. I'm an archaeologist. Emily.
Yeah, I would say for myself personally, I'd want a mentor who's very approachable and friendly. That's the main thing for me. And yeah, someone who's knowledgeable about the sector, but I suppose like a widespread knowledge, so they don't, or someone, if I'm going into the sector, I personally want to focus on conservation. So someone who knew about different conservation techniques. And for myself, I'd quite like to go into like restorations of old buildings and things like that.
Okay.
So someone who has knowledge of what skills you need for that and the equipment and things like that.
That's really good, because I think conservation as well it's really, well, it's very technical.
Yeah.
and as you say, there's only so much you can learn perhaps in a talk course, and really learning from professionals can really enhance that knowledge and understanding, can't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about so obviously I imagine a lot of your youth forum work has gone digital over the last year. How has that helped you, or has it hindered any of your work in any way?
I've not been part of it before it went digital,
okay.
But I find it so much easier that it's digital. I think it's so much more accessible to everyone. Like, I live on Orkney, and right now the ferries certainly would not be running. It's much too windy. So it's a lot of the meetings I just wouldn't be able to get to, and it would be so expensive, and it would just be a waste of it. It's better for the environment. There's no point in traveling if you don't have to.
Yeah.
I love that it's digital. Yeah.
Plus that ferry is rough during winter as well. So if you don't have to take that ferry during winter, don't do it. We've got a few questions coming in on the chat bar. Sarah Pierce, hello Sarah, has asked, do you think a mentor matching service is needed?
I think it definitely is, yes. So like I was saying in my part of the presentation, for young people, it's intimidating to be matched up with someone who's possibly been in the sector for 30, 40 years. So they'll have a lot more experience than you, and they might be disconnected with how to talk to young people. So a matchmaking service would be a very good idea, as you could get matched up with someone of a similar age and perhaps similar interests. So you could have sort of like a bonding experience before you jump right into the work-related talks. It would make it a lot easier.
And I think one thing as well, I've really benefited from mentoring in my career, is you have different mentors at different stages of your career as well. So that it's unlikely you're going to have the same mentor throughout your whole career, sort of thing. So as you say, you need to think about what skills you're looking for at that stage, and target someone to get them to help you with your career. Okay, we've got some other questions here from Ali Cameron. Hello, Ali. I was wondering if you have advice for engaging people of your ages in outdoor events like digs. So if you could think of an enhanced way of getting people engaged in excavations, or public community archaeology excavations, what would you suggest?
I think advertising it more on platforms that we use. I think that if the adverts are seen on those platforms and they're visually appealing adverts, I suppose, that kind of look like, I think sometimes, and I know this is not true at all, but sometimes it can seem like it's a lot for much older generations than us. So I think if it looks like it is for us, and it would be interesting to us, and it's being advertised on the sites that we use, I think that would do a lot of good.
Do you have any specific platforms in mind, do you think? Should we be making TikTok videos to engage with you?
Actually, yes, you would do. There are a lot of companies on TikTok, and it is very, very good. It's very good for companies. I know, actually, it's not this, but I know Young Scott has one for Gaelic.
Okay.
But yeah, that would do very well. And Instagram, TikTok and Instagram, I would say, are the two main ones that would do well.
I had to delete TikTok off my phone because it's like this rabbit hole of video after video. So we could go with Instagram. This is good. I think we've got time for probably one more question. Trying to find some, because I was going to say to all of you, you need to look at all the comments, because you've got so many positive comments coming in on the chat bar, because everyone's really loved your talk. Okay, Lindsay, well done everyone. I personally relate to the feeling that despite having a degree in the field, it can be difficult to get involved in the sector you desire. Do you think this could be improved by an increase of two-way dialogue between academia and the job sector or industry?
I definitely think so. I think there's kind of a missed opportunity with universities and some of the infrastructure there that they have to kind of support that connection. You've all heard of the societies at university, and I think these are a great way to get academia and younger people connected with the heritage sector through specific, I don't know, like archaeology based societies or historic environment Scotland societies that work directly with the organisations and the students at university. And I also think this is a way we've kind of discussed to help with some accessibility issues that young people and students face when visiting, when physically visiting sites, is that we often don't have access to our own cars, and public transport is few and far between. So kind of these concentrated societies where we can incorporate visits to sites, and these are even ways that you can get people more engaged on the volunteering, on in the digs and things like that. I think there's a missed opportunity for a connection and a channel of communication through there.
Brilliant. Right, well, thank you so much. As I say, all four of you just have a look at all the comments in the chat bar, because it's all, everyone is just in awe of your presentation. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. And I really want to follow some of these thoughts up with you, because it's really sparking some ideas in my head. Thank you. Next up, we're heading over to North US to hear from Rachel, Andrew, Lucy, Faye, Anna and Maddie, and who's been exploring the impact of climate change on their heritage. So over to you.
In the summer, we took part on an activities week at Carner School, where we went on field trips and did interviews to help us make the film we made.
We went on 2 field trips, one archaeology trip to Balshire Beach with Rebecca Rennell, where we found lots of interesting artefacts such as pottery that have been there for many, many years.
The second field trip we went on was a rock pooling field trip with Joanne Ferguson, where we learned lots and gathered footage for our film. We interviewed lots of people on the islands. We also added the interviews to our film. We went to Balashire Beach on the second day and did some rock pooling. A woman called Joanne was talking about different seaweeds and how some of them save us from bad storms. The seaweed acts as a barrier and cuts down the speed and height of the waves. There had been an archaeological dig on Balashire Beach in the 1980s where they uncovered a wheelhouse in the dunes. Becky, the archaeologist, had gone with a map where the dig had been, but couldn't find it. She then discovered that it was underwater.
I remember seeing the dark sand on the wheelhouse. The wheelhouse was round because half of the house was underground and the other half above the ground and built out of rock.
We went to the beach and we found something, and it was called a sea squirt. It was like a pea pod, but it was like a seaweed colour. It was like a brown or like a orangey colour. And it was like really slimy and like sticky, and it like didn't feel very nice. And we could only find one. We couldn't find any more, but we were trying to look for some more, but we couldn't.
We found it in amongst the seaweed, and at first we thought it was a fish, but then we picked it up and there was like gooey stuff coming out of it. We were told that it's a piece on the end of a seaweed.
And that we were told that it would go into the water, well, to the ocean, and it would lay down on a, well, not lay down, but like stick on a rock, and it started like sprouting out. It would like start like growing, and then it would be really big.
Chanie, sé glé chóra uair a haisine clachcaigh féimineis. Chanélia tían uamsach trí gan sa bhela head. Snúri hici stocha nach chéilú déisial ar son a gáil gahirí. Sme gémas tú contactar a bhir is dé han cosca sound. Sai na sura túr galta éin. Chemicals sinna ha hula duine clachcaigh inis.
There is no seaweed being washed up at the shore at Middle-Quarter in the last 20 years or more. In my father's time there was plenty of seaweed, but now we hardly get it. We would have barely enough to do potatoes, never mind the whole croft.
No, unfortunately we don't use seaweed as fertiliser now. Seaweed is very useful stuff, but we use commercial fertiliser now.
Once we were introduced to Tom Dawson and his students, he came to the house and we discussed what we were going to do about the filming of Dad's interview. So we went down to the shed and set up all the cameras and we began talking about lots of different things.
First of all, we started talking about just day-to-day things that we do in the farm, and we showed them around as well, so they had an idea as well, so it would make it easier for them. And then we started talking about erosion and how it affects us and how it's changed in the past 10 years or so.
We went round on the quad and fed the sheep, and then Tom and his crew went into the back of the trailer and went round and got some good footage of the sheep. So then they had their drone and then they used it to get some more footage of the cows. And then the cows weren't very happy, they were a bit scared of it, so we decided not to do that. So he just used the drone and got some nice footage of like around the island and most of the places, and some like aerial shots of around the farm and stuff. So it was really nice.
We started talking to Tom and his crew about how crofting is changing all the time and how we think it's going to change in the future. Hopefully both of us or either of us will be crofting in the future, either full-time or part-time. But currently I'm working at Northview Distillery, which is a gin distillery on the west side.
We really enjoy helping Dad around the farm, and we got like lots of different things we like to do like separately. So I like driving the tractors and stuff, and Rachel's a bit more involved with the animals.
Yeah, I prefer the lambing and calving side of things, and last year I think I lambed about 30 sheep, which was quite good, so really enjoy that side of stuff. I also like driving the tractors too whenever Andrew lets me.
Crofting has been with us for hundreds of years, and it is a form of perhaps subsistence farming.
Crofting is like small scale farming, like small holdings.
Crofts are on the whole very of small acreage, whereas mainland farms understandably perhaps are 10 times, 20 times bigger.
It's a lot more rural, so there's not as many, like you can't fit as many sheep, say, onto a croft here as you can, like, onto a croft in the mainland, like a farm.
The crofting takes place mostly on the western seaboard of North Uist because of the soil type there, which we call Macherland.
The Macher habitat is like a shell sand. It's a sandy soil structure, like free draining. It's like a dune habitat.
With quite a good high pH and is very good for crops.
It's just been created over thousands of years, so it's very precious. It's quite rare.
On Bernary, the crofting is still done very much the same way as it always has been. The whole Macher is fully stocked and still ploughed and corn growing the way they've always done. They're keeping to the traditional ways of doing things.
Macherland, which is generally very flat and very easily cultivated.
And it's a very thin soil, so we don't deep plough, we shallow plough. The Macher habitat is very important to us because for various reasons. The first one I would say is the cattle. We winter the cattle on the Macher. They graze this habitat, and then in the summertime then we take the cattle off and all the plants flower and seed.
Macherland benefits from cropping and proper management.
The other issue that we use the Macher for is for cultivation. We use a 2-year crop, 2-year fallow system, so it's quite a low intensity again. It's not ploughed every year.
The crops that we grow here are mostly oats, and we have fields of grass for silage, and these are fed to sheep and cattle in particular.
It's very, very sustainable. It's low input, which suits the Macher system.
Is seaweed the main fertiliser you use?
Years ago it was, and it was the only fertiliser used because all the crofters then were either full-time crofters or crofter fishermen.
Thank you very much for sharing that. It was really beautiful. I think just to see, well, not only to see the landscape of North Uist, but to hear some of those narratives of the landscape and the relationship of people's relationships with the land. It was really beautiful. I wonder, is Mary here? Mary Morrison? We've got time for a few questions if Mary is here.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
I'm here. I don't know if any of the young ones are here or not. I can't tell.
There's a lot of people in the Zoom room. I'm having trouble seeing if they're here as well. But make yourself known if you are here, because we'd love to see you. I think everyone's just saying how beautiful that presentation was. But we've got a few questions, I think, if you're happy to answer a few questions. I mean, as I said, it was really beautiful to see the video, and I just wondered what made. Oh, hello, Andrew and Rachel. Hello.
Great.
That's brilliant. And Tom. Oh, hi, Tom.
Hi Andrew, hi Rachel, hi Mary.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Andrew and Rachel too.
Oh, and then got, yeah, Lucy and Faye down there.
Oh, hi, Lucy.
Hello. Hello.
Lucy and Faye, great.
Hello. This is great. Just chat and have a chat over the next 5 minutes. It's brilliant. I love that you chose a video, because I think it was just really lovely to just sit back and watch that video. And I wondered what made you choose a video format to tell that story, maybe rather than a more traditional format. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, if I just say we've got a wee, thanks to Museums Galleries Scotland, we've got a wee travelling backpack of quite good kit now.
Hey.
And because we anticipated the pandemic lasting and everything can be sanitized and travel around, I think because we've recently had cases on North Uist, we originally planned for 6 of the key people who'd worked with Tom to initiate a film project. And they have in fact been filming for our COVID virtual archive exhibition that will be launched in April. How is the island surviving? But then the group edited very quickly the clips of the videos they'd already made as a presentation. And Skipa Vesca Juluin means the Monday evening club, which is when we have the Zooms, because it's all distant. And we've had some funding for a social media consultant, and Anna Black, I don't know if she's here, but she's worked with the 4 to help to make the film.
That's really great. And well, as I say, it benefits us because we've got to see the end product. I was really struck, we've got one question in the chat, but I'm just going to ask one quick question. I was struck by Andrew and Rachel's observations of erosion and how it's sort of changed within your lifetime. And I thought that was a really interesting observation, because I think when we think about landscape change, we often think of wider generation gaps and that. So it was really useful to, I suppose, to hear about your direct observations on the landscape you live in. Was there anything? Yeah, it was just a general point, I know. Okay, right, we've got a question. I know in big cities, this is from Colin, I know in big cities like Aberdeen have very large amounts of funding to put towards the prevention of erosion. Do you think more could be done to afford the same prevention scheme to island populations? Do you think some of that funding perhaps could be utilised a bit more to help safeguard some of the heritage or some of the natural resources?
Tom, have you anything to say about that?
I think that's probably a question for Nature Scott. Usually people don't put up coastal defences in places like Macha because the erosion is a natural process. So the sand goes from one area, but it comes back in somewhere else. But obviously if it's affecting a heritage site, you have to try and do something with that. And probably the best thing to do is set up a project and actually start recording the finds, as has been done at Balasher in the past. But what do you guys think, Andrew and Rachel and Lucy and Faye?
Yeah, I think something probably could be done if we arrange something, but it's not too bad at the moment. But one big gale could take away 5-10 meters, but it's only taking a wee bit away every so often, so it's not damaging our area too much.
And we've got you on the ground to monitor it as well, which is really, really awesome and brilliant. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for all of you for coming here today on Saturday morning to share your project and to share the video, because it was really, really interesting to watch and hear your thoughts. And I think we'll definitely be bringing out more themes out in the discussion towards the end of the conference today, this conversation today. So we're going to move on to our next paper now, which we've had a slight change of schedule. We're now going to hear from Catherine, Hayley and Jenna, who are going to be talking about their work with Blueprint 100, Learning Together. So over to you, Catherine, Hayley and Jenna.
Thank you. Caveat that I would normally Hayley and Jenna would be sort of leading this presentation, but they've literally just rejoined the Stove team, and I felt that that was a bit much to ask of them, but they've got loads to say. So I'm going to try to tell the Stove story to give you a bit of a context of who we are, a bit of a context for Blueprint, and leave enough space, hopefully at the end, for you to talk to them and ask them questions about their experience, about what Blueprint is, how we work with under 30s, hopefully in a way that's really useful. Okay, so I'm going to assume that if nobody's shouting out, that that's okay for everybody. Yep. Okay. So hello, everybody. I'm Catherine Wheeler. I'm part of the core team at the Stove Network. The Stove is a civic community space founded by artists, and it sits on the high street of Dumfries. We are a values-based organisation that uses creativity as a tool to actively involve our local community in shaping a future for our town. We have a commitment to locally led solutions, growing and supporting the creative work in D&G, and advocating for the role that creativity can have in grassroots action and community-led decision-making. At the Stove, we see our role as artists as using creative practice to play with ideas as part of our community. How can we be a relevant resource for our community? What can we evolve together? We use our building as part of that conversation, as you can see here with the signboard, as well as lots of testing and playful activities in public space. We believe that art is not just for an arts audience, but for everyone. And I should say, I've not put any examples of our real sort of landscape-based and interaction with heritage projects, but we actually do that a lot. We have a very strong relationship with Historic Environment Scotland, who have been very supportive of our work. So to put that in a wider context of who we are, Dumfries is the biggest town in Dumfries and Galloway, southwest Scotland. We have around 30,000 people. We have an aging population, lower than average employment levels, and we lose a lot of our young people to the larger cultural centres like Glasgow and Carlisle, and because of a lack of meaningful learning and work experience for them. Our town centre is in the top 10% of Scotland's multiple index of deprivation, not an uncommon story, lots of empty shops, leading to absentee landlords, leading to neglected properties, inflated rental prices, and no sort of local spaces, small spaces for local businesses, and no affordable accommodation. There's only one resident in our high street. So this framed, this framed the question of what is the purpose of a 21st century rural market town in the 21st century. So the Stove started really to sort of address that question. How could we explore that creatively as part of our place from our building on the high street? So the arrow there points to where the Stove building is, and the shaded red area is a project that grew out of the Stove called Mid-Steeple Quarter, which I will mention incredibly briefly later. Our regeneration strategy is very simple. If you grow people, you grow events and activity, you grow collaborative partnerships around projects. We do this through what we call a conversational practice. We build spaces for conversation, places to imagine things differently, to gather differently, to participate through activity differently. This work has formed itself, if you like, into two main strands of activity. To think about issues of our place together and come up with community-led solutions, particularly around community-led planning, and also as a place for sharing skills, learning and career development, particularly for young people, but also for people like myself who were sort of mid-career, if you like. We run a program of, in order to do this, we run a program of regular monthly and annual events, as well as other collaborative and locally specific programming from a 3-story building on the High Street, alongside more responsive and strategic projects and activity. The building is a hub from which to explore and test uses of public space. It's a place for local groups to come together and talk about their needs, particularly from the cafe on the lower floor. And it's a place from which to develop larger partnership events that celebrate the identity of our town. This is Nithraid, an annual river festival event, and the Stove creates a village of activity along the banks of the River Nith there, which was a particular issue around flooding for Dumfries. So this is a Stove practice that has grown community projects, events and festivals and new social enterprises for our town. This is Dumfries Music Conference, which is now an independent KIC and uses our building as a central point from which to run their annual festival and year-long programme of activity, particularly focused on under 30s actually, and young people with mentorships and commission opportunities, workshops. This is Deluxe Light Festival, an annual event run by a new collective that formed over the last few years. And this is the Mid-Steeple Quarter project, possibly one of the most notable and ambitious projects that has grown out of this Stove, this practice that I'm talking about from the Stove. And it's now a community benefit society in its own right, has been for a few years, and a multi-partner, multi-million-pound development project well on its way to redeveloping part of our High Street, that area that I pointed to earlier that was highlighted, into a multi-use space for small businesses and affordable living space owned by our community. And this is particularly relevant for encouraging young people back into our town centre, to live in our town centre. So that's the Stove story. What is Blueprint 100? Blueprint 100 has been a constant and evolving part of this work right from the get-go. So a way to support emerging creatives as part of the Stove and co-develop activity work and learning opportunities for under 30s. And we find it more useful to define young people as under 30 for a few of the reasons that I think some of the people here today have already highlighted. Blueprint 100 has been grown by and for under 30s and started alongside the Stove in the very early days by a group of young volunteers. Hayley was one of those volunteers and is here with us today. The Blueprint 100 curatorial team grew as a supported and paid team to design and program activity and recognize the needs of our young people who often don't fit into those traditional learning pathways, and particularly to address the issues of accessibility for those from more disadvantaged backgrounds who just simply can't volunteer to get work experience that's needed in a lot of the arts, culture, creative and heritage industries. Blueprint 100 activity has always been topical and informed by current issues for its members. This is a mental health exhibition that they curated. As well as independent activity and events, they also work alongside and collaborate with Stove Programme. This is a procession for Nithraid, which I spoke about earlier, which for the past 3 years has been curated and coordinated by our young Blueprint 100 team. As part of that, Blueprint 100 has always aimed to provide specifically targeted commission opportunities for emerging creatives and ways for them to gain work experience. This was a commission as part of Nithraid, and a Blueprint 100 gave a Blueprint 100 member the opportunity to undertake a large piece of public art. This event was developed by one of our Blueprint 100 curatorial team and was a new festival, ended up being quite collaborative with National Theatre of Scotland, and provided a series of micro commissions for under 30s to do these very sort of pop-up performances, which was just brilliant. Blueprint 100 has been a place to interrogate what emerging and young creatives want, and particularly what they need. in arts and culture? What is relevant to them and how can they access it? And most importantly, it has been a place for them to make mistakes and take risks without us mitigating against that purely for what we want to see as an output. So like I said, usually I wouldn't present for Blueprint 100, but Hayley and Jenna have just been recommissioned as part of the STOVE team, literally working out their contracts last week. They've both gone away, built up their careers, still studying in Jenna's case, but they've stayed in touch. And recently they both were part of co-leading a period of consultation and development work for Blueprint 100 to address some of the issues of how we could widen the accessibility and opportunities for under 30s. And they've come back on board to prepare it to launch it with us in April after a year off. So I'm going to let them say hello, and then you can ask them whatever you like. Let me figure out how to stop sharing. Wait a minute, go over onto the other screen. And Jenna, would you like to say hello and just whatever you feel like, a bit about yourself, what you've been up to?
So hello everyone, my name's Jenna McCrory. I'm a folk musician and producer. I'm currently finishing my degree in folk and traditional music, and I was formerly before going to uni, I was on the curatorial team for Blueprint 100, and now upon ending my studies, I am the creative producer for a Blueprint 100 project called The Creative Space.
And can I also add to that, that Jenna also got a commission to be part of the Atlas Pandemica project for the STOVE, just purely not as a targeted young person opportunity, but just as a creative professional in her own right. And just is doing a brilliant project. So look it out, based on hate speech around LGBTQ community. So yeah, I can try to remember to post some links for everybody. Hayley, do you want to say hello?
Oh, hello. I was just about to take a drink of water there. So I am actually I'm calling myself a freelance creative because I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything at the moment. What I'm most interested in is increasing accessibility and engagement, particularly for the creative sector. So like one thing that I found, coming from a rural area as well, and coming from a working class background, and then going on to study, I actually studied fashion design at the Glasgow School of Art. There's definitely a disconnect there in terms of how easily you connect with, I guess, what art school and then developing a creative career really is. Like something that I noticed in particular was like a language barrier. Obviously not in terms of the actual language we're speaking, but there's almost this like artist language that's separate to how you would actually talk and interpret things, I suppose. So that's sort of led me to where I am now, which is being really interested in like, how do we make this stuff easier for people to understand and easier for people to feel like they can participate in it. So that's kind of what I'm the most interested in doing. I feel like that's quite wishy-washy. I've not got like a specific folk musician title like Jenna does that's easier to say. So I started volunteering with Blueprint 100 in its really early days, like when it first started in 2014. That's really long ago. I've dipped in and out just as I've been through my studies and stuff. And as Kat said, I worked with them last year for the redevelopment, and now I'm going to read the actual project brief because I'm still getting used to what my job is. I'm working with Blueprint 100 again as part of their Pathways initiative. So my official role is to develop and grow connections with local and regional groups and organisations, and it basically builds opportunities for people in the same trajectory that we've been doing, but obviously we can always do even better. That's all I
could say that that's part of working alongside Skills Development Scotland, to really look at how these more informal structures and young person-led initiatives can feed into particularly COVID response work, but also the more the delivery of those types of larger organizations, particularly in rural areas. So that's us, Cara, but shall we open for questions?
Yeah, that was just fantastic. And I loved obviously Catherine hearing from you, but I loved hearing from Jenna and Hayley, and I want to hang out with you both. It just sounds awesome. That was just really brilliant. I think we might have a few questions or comments, lots of positive comments about the work of the Stove Network and Blueprint itself. And one question I had actually was about the break that you've both had from the initiative. You've sort of gone away for a year and now you've popped back again. And I just wondered how that break or that distance has perhaps helped inform your second round of engagement with the Blueprint scheme, if it has at all or not.
I think the big thing for me, and I don't know if Jenna can maybe say the same, because we've both went on to study in cities that obviously have a lot more of a, I guess, obvious or visible kind of culture. And I think there's something that I've always thought about even throughout my degree, that like you really, really notice what you need in communities like Dumfries and Galloway when you've been away from them and see what's available everywhere else. And in some cases what isn't available too. I think that's the biggest impact it's had for me being away, is that you sort of look at it from a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
Get a way to understand it better sometimes.
Absolutely. I think sometimes distance can just help with that sort of period of reflection, isn't it, really? And, you know, and perhaps things you think did matter don't matter so much. I don't know. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Did you have any thoughts on that or similar?
Yeah, I think obviously like the world's so fast moving now, and particularly in a time of social change like this. And we don't live in the same kind of world where we used to live, where you're expected to do a career for your entire life anymore. So I think for me, I've absolutely adored all of my work I've done through the Stove and Blueprint, but I just really needed to go and kind of hone my craft somewhere. And I think that's the difference with the whole Blueprint restructuring. Prior to me going to university, my involvement with Blueprint 100 was part of a 4-person curatorial team, which was much more focused on developing young people, whereas I'm now rejoining the initiative in a position where I am a young person with a more developed practice, now giving back into the community almost. Like Catherine was saying that our whole structure at the Stove is based around grow people. And I would really consider myself one of those people that has been grown by the Stove and is now, I'm so lucky to have this opportunity to give back to the local community.
Oh my goodness, Jenna, you're going to have me weeping before 11:05, I think. Like, that's really great. I don't know if we've got any questions in the chat. I think we've just got lots of positive comments. So the other thing I wanted to pick up on was paid placements, Catherine. And is it just some of the placements are paid, and how integral is that to the sort of success of the scheme?
I think it's massive, to be honest, and I think it's something we don't talk about enough. Everything from us having people on the Blueprint 100 curatorial team who might not have a computer. So payment doesn't always mean that you're paid a wage, but accessibility needs, I think, are really important to talk about. Travel, how people can, some people actually a small payment for a very short time can completely mess up their benefits. And that's something that we found with our project. So it's a conversation that has to be had on a case by case basis, definitely. But when we talk about accessibility, providing, so the Blueprint 100 shape will still have a sort of 10 months to a year paid associate artist position with a stipend. It's probably still not as high as it should be to give them a real opportunity, but hopefully enough so that they only have to work sort of part-time alongside it. And it's targeted at people at any stage, whether they've just come straight out of school or they've chosen to do a degree or any work, as long as they feel that it could really be a launch pad for them at this point. And I think that it's just really important to recognize, especially in our sectors, that it is still very it's still lacking that diversity due to social backgrounds. So it's also why we try to provide even just little paid commission opportunities. Having said that, the way that people grow the best out of it is they still do put in a tremendous amount of their own time, but then that becomes a choice. So my role has always really been to support them to work out how that works for them, so that they don't feel pressured to have to put in that extra time, and that they can put it in when they've got it, and then take it back when they need, and to manage the expectation of the organization, and you know, it's constantly evolving. We haven't got it all right by any, you know, Jenna's laughing. I mean, we cry in our meetings. I mean, Jenna's like, yeah, I don't model it very well either, because, you know, I just work no matter where the money's coming from. I'm still freelance, but we're good at having the conversations about it, aren't we, Jenna? I think,
and I think you're absolutely, the idea of paid placements, I think, is the only way we're going to sort of breach gaps and background gaps, and enable, as you say, our professions to be getting more diverse, because at the moment they favour those that can work for or volunteer for free at times, and that's why we've got the self-perpetuating issue of audiences and demographics within the heritage sector.
And it's really like the Stove is about learning together. So we're working with Skills Development Scotland and even Dumfries and Galloway Council at the moment, you know, so it's even just changing the system of what they think in how they set up their systems. So for example, you know, how people can access that, you know, and I think that's really important, is having that meet as well between how systems are designed. Yeah.
Okay. We are running into break. We have got one more question. I'm just going to ask, how did Jenny and Hayley get involved with Blueprints? And was this a young person initiative from the start? But you've literally got 10 seconds to answer. Or you don't have to answer at all.
Try to answer really quickly. So I got started with it in 2014, and the Stove had only been going, I think, 3 years at that point. I think they maybe noticed a gap in actually engaging young people in the arts locally, and also creating opportunities locally, so that we stopped running away to Glasgow and Edinburgh and London. So they literally emailed a few people that had participated in the past that were young and said, do you want to set up something that's for your demographic? And so we did. And it was called the Young Stove for a long time. After about 6 months, we thought of a name that wasn't so tied to the Stove, and that's it, from my end anyway. I'm not sure about Jenna so much.
Thank you, Hayley.
I actually I got involved with the Stove in the first instance through a wider kind of internship as part of the Nithraid Festival. And then from kind of that small chunk of work, I kind of got pointed in the direction of this project that was maybe a bit more appropriate for me. And then just, yeah, that was the start of it all.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I could talk to you guys for hours. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your learning points from your work as well. It's an incredible model of delivery, and I know that there'd be lots of people here working out how it could be emulated in other parts of the country. So thank you all very much. We now have time for a break. So we're going to have some breakout rooms this time, which should be at the bottom of the screen, or Tessa, our tech extraordinaire, is going to give you an option for breakout rooms. So I think they might be coming. Bear with us. This is the first time we've done something like this before, and the idea is the breakout rooms will give you a chance to have a chat or catch up with people if you want to, or you go and get a cup of tea or coffee. So you can just see at the bottom of the Zoom rooms if you click on that, you've got an option of 12 rooms, and you can join a room and have a chat with someone for the next 10 minutes or so. But otherwise, we'll get back here at 11:20 to hear from our next paper and project. So thank you so much for the start of the session, and we'll see you shortly. Hello everyone, I think we'll get back started if we're ready to come back. Just check. That's great. I hope you all managed to get a quick cup of tea or a biscuit or an oat cake or whatever, or managed to see your child or cat or dog to check that no one is maimed and everyone's all okay. One thing we're trying to do a little bit differently today is do some live polling, and what you'll see at the bottom of your screens is our first question, which is, what is your favourite sweet? We thought we could try with a fun one today, first off, and then later on in the session we're going to have some different questions that will hopefully inform our steps going forward. So the 81 people that are now online. You've got about another half a minute to do it. Oh, Maltesers are coming out at the top. If you feel
Come on, let's hear it for jelly babies, folks. Come on.
Yeah, if you feel strongly Maltesers shouldn't be out at top, then get polling. We've got chocolate buttons coming in at second. It's the annoying thing about being a co-host, I can't vote. I feel excluded. Because I'd be voting for Haribo, just so you all know. Okay, let's end the poll. Wow, so everyone's favourite sweet out in front is Maltesers. I think I can share the results. Can everyone see those? Brilliant. Okay, so we know that the live polling works, which is exciting. So stay tuned and we'll get some other questions launched throughout the session. So that's really good to know that's working. But 2 minutes overrunning, but we'll make sure we catch that up. We next have Lindsay Horsham, who will be talking about the project Our Story Scotland, and she's going to be talking about bridging the generation gap through oral history archives of LGBT communities. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Cara. So I'm going to try and share my screen. So if somebody could please let me know if it actually works, because I'm not the best with this sometimes. Is that working?
Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. So hi everyone. As Cara said, my name is Lindsay and I'm a volunteer at Our Story Scotland, and I'm going to be talking about bridging the generation gap through oral history archives of the LGBTQ+ community. So I just wanted to give you a brief idea first of the format of my presentation. So first I wanted to talk about Our Story Scotland generally, so who we are and what we do. And then I also wanted to talk about previous projects in which Our Story have actually engaged with the younger communities. I personally don't really know that much about it. I did have to check with my chair, as I did only join the charity last year, but I do have some examples that I can give you all. And then I wanted to talk about my own experience with Our Story Scotland, so why I got involved originally, what I did, and what I found while I was working with them. And then finally, I was going to talk about this notion of bridging the gap as well. So, just get my notes organised. Yeah, so Our Story Scotland was first established in 2002. So just for some context, I was 6 at the time, so I have had to do quite a lot of research in regards to this. But Our Story Scotland is a small Scottish charity that was established in 2002 following the realisation that no individual or organisation was actively collecting the stories of Scotland's LGBTQ+ community. So Our Story Scotland, through a few grants and through just networking with the volunteers, basically established themselves and then started to do this research. And the primary purpose of Our Story Scotland is to collect, archive and present the life stories of Scotland's LGBTQ+ community. And they do this in a variety of different ways. So we collect oral histories, we record them, and then we summarise them. So they go in the national libraries and the national museums. However, we also take written accounts such as like page-long episodes. I have an example on a screen later on. We do workshops, and we also just do like theatre design. We do a lot of different things that people can get involved with. So initially, the charity did focus specifically on recording the stories of the elder LGBTQ+ community, as Our Story Scotland felt it was important to capture the stories of people that potentially aren't going to be here for much longer. And it did also make sense to them to focus more on this generation, as obviously there was a lot of changes throughout that time. So even if you're wanting to track things like the decriminalisation of homosexuality, Section 28, or even the AIDS crisis, they felt it was important to try and track these cultural moments with the real accounts of people before those accounts may be lost. So, however, and I'll address this later on, Our Story Scotland did actually realise pretty early on that the accounts of the younger LGBTQ+ generation was also important. So that's something that just through time they actually realised they needed to focus a little bit more on. So, yeah. So, I spoke with our chair, Jamie Valentine, about the different ways Our Story Scotland has encouraged youth engagement in the past. And Jamie expressed that it did largely depend on the event initially. So when Our Story Scotland first started up, they really did focus mostly on these oral history interviews. So they usually consist of about an hour to 2 hours long, and it's just an Our Story volunteer and one other individual. Sometimes it's a couple, sometimes it is groups, but it's usually solo, and they basically just record this person's account of their life. However, Our Story, in an effort to basically just become more active and go a bit further afield, did take part in other things. So then they found that Pride was one of the ways that if they had like a table up or a stall of some kind, they found that they had a lot more youth engagement that way. Other things were going to university associations and societies, and they found that episodes were very popular there. So that's the thing that you can see on the screen. And they have a couple of different ones. So they have a basic one like this. They have another one focusing specifically on people who have moved into Scotland from other countries, or even from rural areas to urban areas, and basically tracking how that has impacted their lives. And they also got involved in a lot of collaborations, particularly with LGBT Youth Scotland. I don't have any examples specifically on the slides, but I do have links to the website at the end of the presentation if that's something you'd be interested in as well. And specifically after I joined, so I joined last year, they have actually found that there's been a few more younger volunteers getting involved as well. And when I spoke to Jamie about this, he thinks it's been partly due to coronavirus and due to lockdown, and obviously people just having more time on their hands and looking for other ways to get involved with things. So, in regards to my own experience with Our Story Scotland, I joined the charity in February 2020 as part of my master's internship in gender studies. So my primary role when I was with the charity was summarising the oral histories. So essentially what happens when they complete these oral history interviews, we give them to the National Libraries of Scotland. However, we also have to submit an oral summary. So essentially I had to condense all of these oral histories onto paper. And throughout my internship, which was I think about 10 weeks long, I did over 30 of them. So I spoke with the National Library and we submitted them, and then we had a discussion about that as well. However, while I was also there, I took part in a couple of different storytelling events. So we did one with the Glasgow Disability Alliance, and that was actually primarily younger people that did take part. And they did the episodes that I showed you on the previous screen. And I also took part in some other storytelling events as well. So we did a collaboration with LGBT Health and Wellbeing, and it was a zine making event, and that focused specifically on trans lives. And while I was on my internship as well, I also conducted my own oral history research and interviews in regards to my thesis, which focused on bisexuality and bi-erasure. And then finally, I thought I would talk about this notion of bridging the gap, as this was something that definitely came up a lot through my observations while I was with the charity, but when I was conducting my own research, but also something that I felt that was mentioned a lot by other interviewees that I was listening to. So I'm just gonna have a look. Yeah, so I think the main thing that came up was definitely that there was this sense of, speaking to the older LGBTQ people, that there was this idea of lost history, and they felt like this was coming from a few different ways. So the move from kind of LGBT centres in city centres that have since been closed to the move to online spaces, especially under coronavirus, they felt like people weren't necessarily connecting with the community as much. And because of these digital spaces, they also didn't necessarily feel like they could have been as involved. However, I think it also came up that there was definitely a misconception about the LGBT youth when they were speaking about these kinds of things. Because obviously the culture is different, and you are looking at things like Section 28 and the decriminalisation of homosexuality. But there's definitely this sense, I think, of younger people having it easier now. And one of the main things that came up, one of our other volunteers went into a school and took episodes that had been written previously, and he had students and older people try and order them, and he found that they just couldn't do it. So an account from like 2010 compared to 1990, and people going all the way back, and they couldn't work it out. So I think by engaging with the LGBT youth and the elder LGBT community, you're realizing that it's not necessarily that it's easier for one group or the other, it's just a bit different. And then finally as well, in speaking about this kind of thing, I was talking to Jamie, our chair, and one of the main things that came up as well was the importance of speaking to the LGBT youth, because it helps us map cultural changes and evolving language. So for example, when Jamie interviewed myself, and we interviewed other people as well, we found a lot of younger people prefer to use labels such as queer or maybe non-binary, whereas if you were speaking to the elder LGBTQ plus community, obviously a lot of people, for their own personal reasons that are totally understandable, may have some issues in regards to using terms like queer. So I asked Jamie, and we both discussed it for about an hour last week, just in ways that we could encourage youth engagement just for things like oral histories, because it is something that does tend to be an older generation that get involved. So in discussing it, Jamie and I were thinking that what matters the most is kind of what you're doing and where you're doing it. Like he's found, and other people throughout have also found, that things like podcasts, blogs, zines, they've been much more popular in engaging the youth, because our lives have been shorter, we don't necessarily feel like we can sit down and talk about it for 2 hours. So it's just creating other ways for people to get their stories across. And as mentioned in the earlier presentations, it's about creating this two-way dialogue as well, and bridging this notion that there is a naivety on both ends, and the only way to kind of overcome that is to really discuss it as a group. So that's me pretty much done. But as I mentioned, there are some links just for you to see the kind of stuff that Our Story Scotland has done in the past. And I also know we're doing a couple of different things now as well. So if you have any questions on that, please let me know.
Thank you so much for that, Lindsay. That was really fascinating and a really comprehensive run through in like 10 minutes. So well done. It's really good. My conference colleague, Audrey, is joining me on the screen because Audrey's really familiar with your project. So I don't know if we've got any questions to sort of start off our discussion.
Well, I was interested, Lindsay, because the other thing as well, it is actually it is LGBTQ plus History Month, isn't it? And I just wanted to know sort of a bit about the background and some of the things you might be doing actually in February.
Yeah, of course. So this isn't something that I'm actually involved with myself at the moment. It's Jamie and our other volunteer, Dom. But we did this last year as well, and we had a group interview with Edinburgh University's Pride Network. So obviously it's quite a good space to do that, because you get people from Edinburgh, you get people coming into the city for different reasons, whether that be just like a village further out or from different countries, and you get a lot of different age ranges as well. So we do quite a lot of oral histories and that kind of stuff. And we do have other collaborations at the moment. Jamie's working with a couple of younger volunteers just now, getting involved with oral histories for personal research and academic research too.
Mm. Okay. I mean, the other thing as well, Cara, is we've got some things in the chat room. People
got some questions in the chat bar here. So from Scott. Scott asks, do Our Story Scotland facilitate conversations between different generations of LGBT+ communities? And if so, how has that been received?
Sorry, I'm just having a look at it. Yeah, I think we definitely do try to do it. Like, for example, some of the interviews that I conducted last year for my own research, it was people who I would say were of a slightly older generation, and we all identified as bisexual, but I think some of the stuff that did come out, it wasn't necessarily hostile, like that's not what I'm trying to say at all, but you were definitely getting different attitudes towards the same thing, and it just opened up the conversation a bit more, because when we delved into why we thought that compared to another person, it just made it more interesting. Like, and I think it has been really positive in regards to the way that Our Story has tried to engage with the different generations as well.
Brilliant. We've got a second question here from Rosie, and based on the learning from her study, does Lindsay, or yourself, have any thoughts on what should be priority partnerships for 2021 and beyond?
If in regards to priority partnerships for Our Story Scotland, I think one of the things that they're very aware of is the fact that as of right now, most of the people that do volunteer, and it is all volunteers, like none of us are paid, most of us do this outside of additional work. Most of the volunteers are pensioners, so they've got a lot of time on their hands, so they definitely want to get more involved in, say, like workshops with going into schools, connecting more with people who are doing it from like an academic point of view. I know that one of our volunteers, Dom, he did some work with Pink Saltire recently, which was a, I think, Fife-based LGBT organisation. Like Jamie, coming from academia himself, he has so many different connections in so many different ways. So we're quite fortunate in the sense that there's quite a lot of stuff that's always coming up opportunity-wise. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything in particular, but I would say definitely kind of the youth engagement is a big focus at the moment, and also this coming in project that they're doing with people coming into Scotland from different countries as well, especially post-Brexit.
That's brilliant. And we've got a not techie question, but I don't know what Polari is, which is similarly, do you think exploring the integration of Polari into modern language would be an interesting way of engaging younger LGBT+ audiences?
Yeah, so
I'm showing my massive ignorance there.
Just for a brief summary, like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, Polari was kind of like a slang language that was used within the LGBT community previously, and in a sense, I think it has kind of phased out now. And a lot of people, if you don't study it, like I did a lot of queer studies and a lot of gender studies, so it is something I'm aware of, but it's not something that people necessarily know about now. But I think it's a very good way to kind of focus on the way language has changed and everything like that. So yeah, I think that would be something that would be really interesting.
Scott's offered to give an explanation of that. Scott, I don't know if you're here for the discussion afterwards, but we'd love to hear more about it maybe in the wider discussion, if that would be okay.
More than happy to.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, hi, Scott. Brilliant. Okay, well, because I want to try and keep this element to time.
Yeah.
My last sort of question, which is a tricky question because I'm sneaking in. You said there was increased engagement during coronavirus, and I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit, but also if you feel there's any other audiences that have dropped away, or.
So this was just mostly from speaking with Jamie. I think partly because of my own research, like when I first started doing it, I certainly took to Twitter with it. I'm involved in a couple of different organisations as well. And there did just seem to be an awareness of LGBT, I think LGBT youth in general, especially in regards to maybe the trans issues and the transphobia that's becoming apparent at the moment. Like I think there is just an increased engagement with it. But I think just with lockdown and obviously people being furloughed and not necessarily being able to go into work, people just do have more time to do things like this, and working with kind of the oral history recordings and the summarizing, it is something you can do from your living room. So in that sense, there's definitely been increased engagement. Jamie hasn't necessarily mentioned anything to me in regards to people becoming less involved, but then of course, a lot of stuff is digital now, whereas our story used to meet people in person to record these interviews, and there's been a lot of kind of technical difficulties in learning how to combat that digitally, because Our Story Scotland is very specific in the recording equipment they use. So in that sense, they haven't been able to conduct as many oral histories, but instead we've shifted to things like the episodes and the workshops and the zine making instead. So it's just been about adapting it.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And it's great to hear more detail on that. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay. Are you going to be around for the discussion later? Perfect. So we'll maybe be able to pick up some of these points later on in the discussion. But we're now going to move on to Annie Mottisfont from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who's going to give us an update on youth-focused funded projects.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Brilliant. We can see and we can hear you.
Hi. I'm just going to see if I can just see at the same time. Yeah. Okay. Great. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Annie. I'm from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and I'll just give a very brief kind of 5-minute presentation on our kind of programs at the moment. I'm just going to time myself because otherwise I know I might talk for too long. So some of you will be familiar with our programs, and other people, you know, may not have heard of us before. So I'm very happy to give a brief introduction, and also particularly focusing on what we're talking about today, being youth-focused projects and projects engaging young people in heritage. So we fund all sorts of projects, so community heritage projects right through to industrial, maritime and transport projects, culture and memories, intangible heritage, all sorts of things that sort of that really broad spectrum of heritage. And you don't need to be a registered charity. We fund all sorts of small community, as long as it's a constituted not-for-profit organisation, then we can fund all sorts of voluntary organisations, community groups, youth organisations, youth-led groups, and community interest companies. So you get a really wide spectrum of groups that we can support under our funding. So I'll just give you a very brief update. So the slide that you can just see on the screen now. We reopened our funding on Monday after we'd had a period of closure during the first part of the pandemic, and that was to deliver emergency funding to organisations. So we've reopened our main open funding programmes, and grants start at £3,000. So it's very broad spectrum, and it goes right up to sort of the higher levels of funding. And yeah, the really kind of key thing with all of our funding that I've popped in the slide there is about that kind of who's involved in a project and who's benefiting from projects. So particularly, you know, we are keen to support more youth projects engaging young people in heritage, and it's particularly an area that I work in. So I work with lots of youth organisations and projects that are looking to deliver youth projects as part of my work, and to support those organisations through the kind of application process and kind of what you need to do to put together an application. And I think really interesting today as well, some of the discussion that we've been talking about, you know, some of the kind of things that people have identified of from young people that, you know, that you've identified today around some of those kind of events that have been missing for young people, or kind of training and skills opportunities. So, you know, all of those things that you could build into a project. And yet within that slide, it's just a few things that, you know, happy to talk about in more detail, you know, to anybody who wants to get in touch. It's just some of the things that we've been thinking about, obviously, as well, with climate change, thinking about all projects that are environmentally friendly, and also thinking in the context of COVID, any new project. But I think, again, today it's really interesting about all the kind of digital things and ways that people actually, some of those opportunities that it provides. So again, that could be, you know, certainly something that as part of a project we could support as well, some of those kind of digital ways that people want to, you know, wish to work in the current circumstances as well. So just onto the next slide. These are some of the so some of you may have read our guidance or kind of familiar with our funding, but these are, you know, some of the things that we're really looking at the moment with our kind of programs reopening, opportunities for skills and learning, and you know, what that might provide to help with career opportunities. you know, well-being as well. So again, I think that's something that we've talked about a lot around connecting people with heritage and connecting people to their community, or connecting people digitally online as well, you know, on what benefits that brings in terms of well-being. So yeah, again, these are all much more in detail on our website, but I just thought I'd highlight them into a slide. So just onto the next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, some of the things that we've come across when we've been involved in supporting youth projects, and from speaking to young people, you know, something that I think has come across today as well is about that kind of youth-led approach. So right through from the design to evaluation, you know, that it's that voice of young people who are involved in a project, and that if you're a heritage organisation and you've not developed a project before, that might be connecting with somebody locally, like a youth group or a youth organisation or charity, who could help support you as well and help work with you in a project. And we also have lots of guidance. I'll pop that into the next, is in the next slide, but thinking as well around those opportunities for schemes, award schemes, or kind of ways to celebrate young people's achievements, ways to celebrate participants who've been involved in a project. So for example, lots of the projects we've supported, you know, have had things like Duke of Edinburgh, John Muir Awards, Saltire Awards, or transferable skills as well. So it might be that some of those heritage skills actually can help with transferable skills into a variety of sectors for working. And yeah, and then we also have an online resource as well, which is all about kind of how to engage online with young people, and that was designed in partnership with ChildNet, which I'll pop in the chat a link to it as well. So just on to the next slide, because I realise I'm nearly into 5 minutes, so or about, yeah, just about 5 minutes. So yeah, I'll pop these into the chat, but it's just to say that we've got some really helpful resources on our website. Some of these, so that how to involve young people in heritage, that was designed by young people, so they've written in their kind of bullet points of things to think about, and things that you know, things about those barriers, and things again that we've talked about today about, you know, awareness of opportunities available, or kind of what heritage is, and the kind of that kind of what does that mean, and you know, ensuring that kind of everything's that kind of approach of young people's voice in any project. And YouthLink Scotland have a really good kind of toolkit as well, and resources that was part of a project that we supported, that's still available on their website, with lots of kind of handy hints of the kind of approach they took within 2 of their projects. And then just on to the next slide, I've just put down my contact details and also how to get in touch with us. And just to say, yeah, very happy if you want to pick up the phone or give us drop us an email. There's also a project inquiry form as well for if you're looking for a grant over £10,000, so it's kind of a way to get some feedback and advice from us beforehand. But yeah, it's just to say that we're here, and if you want to get in touch, then feel free to do so. That's a very whistle-stop tour of our funding and our kind of programs, but it's really great to be here, and yeah, really enjoyed the session so far. So I just thought I'd give a very kind of brief overview of the funding that's available. But if you want to get in touch, then I'll pop those details in the chat as well. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Annie. That was a very comprehensive overview in such a short amount of time. So kudos to you for getting that done. Are you happy to answer a few questions, or would you prefer we can submit them later?
I'm happy to answer a couple, and then obviously I'm conscious of time as well. So whatever you think is best.
Well, we've got a few here. So we've got one from Russell, who's worked on a lottery funded project before. And that project was limited to a year. So Russell is asking, is there such limitations to the funding in terms of time?
Yeah,
longer than a year, can't it?
Yeah, it can be longer than a year. So it just depends on the level of funding. So some projects might be 2 or 3 years, or some of the larger projects can last up to about 4 or 5 years. But yeah, it just depends on the level of funding. So some of those sort of smaller projects can be up to a year, but so there is a bit of flexibility there in terms of time frame.
Brilliant. Okay. Never-ending projects, though, are not people. And from Sheila Dewstreet, how does Heritage Lottery Fund, National Lottery Heritage Fund, defined youth? Under 30, under 20, under school age? It's a really good question.
That's a really good question. Yes. We used to have a program called Young Roots about a few years ago that we ran for about 10 or 15 years, and that program sort of said that we looked at research across the kind of age range of 11 to 25, but you know, we are conscious obviously as well that you know that there's that, yeah, it's you know, it's in terms of our kind of funding support, you know, if you're identifying a particular audience, a particular group you're working with that's out with that age range as well, then that's, you know, then that's the kind of group that you want to engage with, and that makes sense. So yeah, we do have that kind of flexibility there. But yeah, I suppose, yeah, we sort of, I'd say we'd say that kind of 11 to 25, which is obviously a very big age range as well in itself.
Lots of scope there. Yeah. Brilliant. So I think Audrey was in your chat room, and Audrey said that there might be some questions from the chat room that might be useful for the wider discussion.
Oh, you see, sorry. Yes, you can see
Hello.
me. I'm not. I keep getting switched off.
It's okay. It's almost lunchtime, so we're all good.
I was going to say actually that something that was coming up, and it's something that I know from up in the definitely up north in the Highlands and the Hebrides, is trying the lottery trying to encourage people to actually join up in groups coming together and putting in bids for joint programs. Is that right? Would you say, Annie?
Do you mean in terms of kind of the opportunity to deliver a joint partnership project? Or?
Yes, in a sense, if you people quite often may be asking for the same thing, and instead of just funding lots of small projects, it's actually getting people to talk to one another and network and see if you can actually do something even better by coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, obviously we see lots of different projects coming in. So it's, you know, something that we always say, have you spoken to this group, or kind of, you know, how you could work together. And, you know, I think that's come up today as well about kind of that sort of networking. And so, yeah, something that as well that we would look at in terms of, you know, are there groups that we can get in touch with to get in touch with others, or, but yeah, in terms of a project, we have funded some projects that have been that kind of partnership approach as well. And you know, that might be 5 or 6 organizations coming together.
Great, yes, because in the chat room there's actually something a little bit linked to that, not exactly, but it's always about you wanting to chat to groups, and also how they can link in the Heritage Hero Award, which is interesting. Is that something you would promote for people to consider?
Yeah, I think all of these kind of award schemes are ways to acknowledge people's achievements and support in a project. I think is really valuable. So again, it's not something that we define or kind of say, you know, what you have to, you know, deliver in a project. That's, you know, that's entirely up to you. Coming to
a lovely outcome to enhance the project, or that enhance the outcomes from the project and stuff, isn't it? Yeah, no, for sure. I'm the Heritage Heroes' biggest fan, I have to say, because it's brilliant watching young people get their Heritage Hero Awards. It's a real sense of achievement. It's brilliant. I think, is there any other burning questions, Audrey?
No, I think that's great.
Is that okay? Okay, Annie, you've been fabulous. Thank you very much. That was a really great comprehensive run through. There's going to be some amazing links that are going to go into the chat bar, I think, in a second. And so everyone check out their new funding stream, because it looks awesome and really, really applicable to what of work that is going on in Scotland at the moment that we've heard about today. So I'm now going to pass over to Eve, who is the curator extraordinaire of the 1 Minute Mayhem. So let's see how this goes.
Thank you, Cara, and thank you again for the amazing timekeeping. You're on a tight ship. Morning, hello everybody. And this is our kind of, you know, regular ritual towards the end of these conversations. The 1 Minute Mayhem, a 60-second soapbox for people to get up and just say what they want about heritage in 60 seconds. At the end of, I will time everybody's little talk, and at the end of, when time's up, I will ring a bell, or in this case, my Nepalese singing bowl, and you're off, okay? So first up, we have, Izzy Hanby. Is he ready?
Yeah. Hello. Well,
right. Okay, great. Izzy is one is one of 5 modern apprentices at the Scottish Cranach Centre on Loch Tay in Perthshire, working with the museum team there as a member of the Cranach community. And Izzy's going to tell us something about that. So Izzy, welcome to the conversation. The floor is yours.
Okay, so yeah, we work at the Scottish Cranach Centre on Loch Tay, which is an open-air Iron Age museum. We all started in August working towards different SVQs, and we knew nothing when we started about anything really about the Iron Age. But within weeks, we were interpreting Iron Age life in different areas, and then after a few months, we were doing full tours on the Cranach itself, which is in the little corner over there. Also, this was very put together, but in October they made us organise and run an event through December, a Yule event, which was very good. So I was the event coordinator, Georgia did finance, Toby did marketing, Will was a historical advisor, and then Daisy did the cooking and networking. We also all have individual projects as well. So for example, Will is learning how to play a 7-string instrument from that time. And we've also presented to John Swinney and a team from Creative Scotland. And also through lockdown, we're working full time and we are learning Makaton as well.
Oh, well done.
That's brilliant. I think you just beat the clock. There's no time for questions at the moment here, but if people want to come back and ask Izzy about things, then there'll be time in the general discussion. Okay, so next we have Catherine Cartmel, who's a colleague at Historic Environment Scotland. Catherine is a Skills Investment Plan Manager for the Historic Environment, and she's here today to tell us something about Kickstart in Heritage, which should be on your screen. Catherine, your time starts now.
Thanks, Eve. The Charters Institute for Archaeology and Historic Environment Scotland are working in partnership with the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations to support heritage organisations of all sizes to access the Kickstart programme. The Kickstart programme provides funding to allow organisations to provide 6-month placements, 25 hours a week for young people aged 16 to 24 years in receipt of universal credit. It will pay minimum wage salary, national insurance contributions and automatic pension contributions. Employers will also receive £1,000 towards training or essential equipment. This programme will run until December 2021. This is an opportunity for our sector to introduce new and diverse members to our workforce, while at the same time providing much needed opportunities for young people. Acting as a gateway organisation, SCVO will support employers through application, recruitment, delivery and evaluation of the scheme, and CIFA and HES will also support employers with advice and training resources, including monthly peer support sessions. So my next slide is my how to find out more. Just
that's great. Everybody see there's Catherine and Cara's emails on screen. Thank you very much, Catherine. Number 3 today we have Audrey Wilson, and Audrey, as many of you will know, is a member of the team that organises these conversations, and Audrey is also Community Engagement Officer at the Scottish Council of Archives. So if Audrey is ready, I shall just say ready, steady, go.
Okay. Oh, can you see me?
Yes.
You can. Oh, good. Okay, because I can only see Eve. Okay, so I think most of you probably think that archives are crumpled old bits of paper, and you're right, they are, but they are also things like maps and photographs and archaeological drawings and architects' plans, but websites, computer printouts, Facebook pages, and we need to keep all these records for the future generations because it tells them a lot about what's going on in community archives. So how are we going to do this? Well, I've got 2 programs coming up. You'll see in the slide, the first one is Next Steps, Caring for Community Archives. It's a drop-in. You do have to sign up in Eventbrite. It's on a Monday morning. And the point being, it's interactive, it's fun, a bit like today, but you're going to learn lots about how to care for your community archives. So it starts on the 22nd of February with how to handle and store your photographs. We also know that people want to upskill their digital skills, and we are going to be doing a webinar series starting at the end of March. I'm going to be
Mind up. You have to email Audrey to find the rest of the story. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So finally, we have Jane Miller. Jane is Young Archaeologist Club Leader and Learning Officer at Archaeology Scotland. And Jane is going to tell us something about that without hesitation, deviation, or repetition. Are we ready? Do we have Jane's slide up? I just see Audrey here. Anyway, if Jane's there, take it away, Jane.
Okay, thank you. I can't see my slide, but never mind. Hello, my name's Jane. I'm Learning Officer with the wonderful Archaeology Scotland, but today I'm going to be talking about YAC, not this YAC, but this YAC. So YAC stands for Young Archaeologists Club. It's the only UK-wide club which deals with archaeology, is dedicated to archaeology. So there are over 70 clubs across the UK, 11 of which are in Scotland. The clubs are run by over 500 volunteers who are supported by the Council for British Archaeology. In the slide, you can see my Young Archaeologists Club in action. So we do everything from digging to geophysics, creating soundscapes and stop motion animations. So YAC creates pathways for young leaders. We also encourage co-creation and amplify youth voice whenever we can. If you adore archaeology, if you're passionate about the past and participation in the past, then please get in touch and get involved. We're always looking for volunteers, whether it's members or leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And that concludes the 1 Minute Mayhem for this month. We'll be back again in March. So if you want to have a slot, then just please let us know. Okay, back to you, Cara.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Eve. That was a fantastic, very smooth run through of the 1 Minute Mayhems. It was brilliant and great to hear snapshots of everyone's projects. Just before the discussion, we're going to launch some live polling. So if you remember at the bottom of your screen, you should have polls, a polls tag. And if you click on that, my colleague Tessa will basically has launched, right, it's brilliant, it's launched now. So we're asking you, what is your preferred day of the week for CHC, for the Community Heritage Conversation? Should it be Wednesday, should it be Saturday, should it be a mixture of both? Perhaps you don't care, that's okay too. So 70 of you have voted. A few more. So we're polling this time rather than the follow-up evaluation. Those of you who have visited us before, rather than sending you an evaluation form to do after the event, we're trying to get a snapshot of your thoughts during the event to try and make it a bit more dynamic. If it doesn't work, we will not do it again, but that's what's exciting about CHC. We can all try new things with each session. Okay, so we appear to have a result. And I think everyone can see the results now. So marginally Saturday, but it's a pretty equal split actually throughout Wednesday and Saturday. So we'll have a think about that as a committee and try and decipher what's left from that. So we're going to have our next poll now. And this is about the frequency of events. Should the Community Heritage Conversations take place every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, or less frequently? I don't know, quarterly. And this is just while we're on a digital format at the moment. So is it too much having us every week? Every week, we can't do this every week. Is it too much having us every month, or would you like to see more or less of us? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So we've got another 20 seconds. I feel like I'm on the Crystal Maze. It's quite exciting actually, watching it fluctuate. Ah, so it's looking like every 6 weeks at the moment, maybe. Okay. Yeah, every 6 weeks is coming out. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, again, we'll go back and have a think about that as a committee. And is that our last one, Tessa? Oh, no, we've got, what topics would you like to see in future events? And I think you might be able to click multiple ones for this one. Maybe. Okay, about halfway through. So developing community engagement is coming out ahead. So that's really interesting. We've got careers and heritage. That's come up quite a lot, hasn't it, over today. Some great discussion points about careers and heritage. So a couple more seconds. And polling ends. Okay, so that's been really useful. It's looking like developing community engagement might be one of our next topics after maybe the April or May topic. That would be brilliant. Okay. And I think that is us for polls. I think. Yes, that's it. That's brilliant. So you've been asked for the top 5. Those are the top 5 you've told us that you want to see. So we'll feed that back into our committee meetings when planning future events. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking part in the polling, because it's really useful for us to get that data and that information. Now you can see there the polling results. And my conference colleague Martin has just asked me to say that the booking for the next month's event will launch next week. So please do keep an eye on the sort of comms channels, and we'll make sure that you get emailed that link as well going forward. And that's on health and wellbeing. So we'd love to hear any thoughts or papers or projects that that should be included in that event. But we've now got time for a discussion, sort of wider discussion. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes to talk further about some of the themes that have been coming up in the session today. And first we're going to go to Scott, who has very kindly offered to talk a bit more about Polari. Hey, Scott.
Hello, hello. So I'm by no means an expert. My interest in Polari went back to, I used to be involved in it was a digital forum for younger LGBT community. And one topic that kept coming up was people were very unsure about LGBT history as a whole. They didn't really know much. So purely sort of voluntary, I decided, okay, I'll go away, do some research and sort of put a post together, a very sort of run through post. And one of the interesting things that I discovered was Polari. Now, Polari it's a very interesting language, so to speak. It is more of a slang, but it was developed and brought together by bringing in various different languages it dates back that we have from the 16th century onwards, and it brought in exotic languages such as, at the time, it might be Yiddish, there were elements of London slang, there was Navy slang, all boiled down, a real linguistic melting pot into one language. And it was used to convey homosexuality without being obvious. It was designed to confuse people. So if you and someone that you knew were talking in Polari, you would understand each other, but nobody else will. So it was a good way of communicating through. If anyone is really interested in learning more, Liverpool museums have a fantastic resource on Polari as a whole. They've also started piecing together a dictionary of Polari. So it's a really great resource there. One of the really interesting things, though, where it comes into modern language is in the 1960s. I'm just trying to remember a little bit. You had a radio show called with two gentlemen. One was Hugh Paddock and the other was Kenneth Williams. It was called Round the Horn. And they actually spoke on their show in Polari. So this is where it starts to enter the modern stream slightly. So an example of words that come from Polari into today, one of them would be the word camp. Camp wasn't associated with homosexuality until the 60s and 70s in the English language. but Polari had been using it for quite a while. So that's one way that it comes into the modern language. It's really, really interesting. So if anyone does want to know more, please feel free to give me a little message and I'll try and pass on to you as much as I can.
I want to learn more. That's absolutely fascinating. Please just spam us with links, because that was just, yeah, really interesting to learn about. Thank you, Scott. No pressure. No. So we've got a bit of time now, as I say, for discussion, and any questions that we feel haven't come up in the event so far. Has anyone got any questions or burning questions? Okay.
Can I jump in?
Hello, Eve.
Could I jump in? I just wanted, if I could, to wind back to the beginning of this morning and the comments that Emily made about the importance of mentoring. And I think she said that she found mentoring from more senior members of staff a bit intimidating, or it could be found a bit intimidating. And what was wanted was more opportunity to mentor and network with younger people. We did have a scheme of it was a Skills for the Future scheme where we had up to 10 people at a time working in HES as on 12-month traineeships, and that team bonded with each other very well. But also each member had a mentor amongst the older, more senior staff, if you like, who introduced them to other parts of the organization, and this worked really well. And I did a lot of mentoring then, and I have still in touch with many of these people who've now moved on to jobs in other organizations, and I know that they all keep together in a very strong network. And that's something I really think we've kind of lost that now, and we really need to bring that back. Now, HES can do that quite easily as being a large organization, or more easily than others. But amongst smaller organizations who may have perhaps 1 or 2 trainees or people starting their careers, I think there's scope for them joining together. I mean, the heritage world is very small in Scotland, and senior heritage members of staff are very good at networking amongst themselves, with each other. That should be extended down and encouraged amongst younger members of staff for them to get to know each other and gather experience in the sector. I really feel that quite strongly. I think people of my age have got a lot to share, and we really need to give back.
I totally agree, and I think for anyone on here today that has been a mentor, it's an incredibly valuable and awesome thing to be part of a mentoring scheme. And whether that's formal or informal mentoring, I get so much out of it, and I learn a lot from the person I'm paired up with as well. I love it. But what's interesting, I'm part of a university mentoring scheme, and it was undersubscribed this year. So I wonder also if there's some work we as a sector need to do to work with younger audiences to perhaps show or talk about the advantage of mentoring. Because I think it's still relevant. I don't think it's not relevant to younger audiences, but maybe people, I don't know if people just feel that's not for them, or they don't know how to get involved with mentors and things like that. So I think it's one we've got to think further about as a sector, for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to see it formalised. Has anybody else got thoughts?
Emily, hi.
Hi. No, I'm fascinated to hear about the mentoring thing you did, because I think one of the main things for me is I don't know where to go to find out about getting a mentor, really. So I think that's something to focus on. It's like promoting your mentorships.
I mean, it's certainly something, the organisation I work for, it's something we're looking at the moment, is how we can offer a more structured and formalised mentoring offer or programme. And it's about capacity as well, that we try and make sure we have the right capacity to support you if you wanted to become a mentee, and what you need from us. But as you say, the first step is actually just trying to network, almost do a sort of matching between people. And ICON do quite a successful and sustainable mentoring service. And actually, if you're interested in conservation work, Emily, that might be good for you. But ICON do a very self-sustainable mentoring service that we've been looking at, so it might be worth checking that offer out as well. And we've got some. Oh, Linda! Hello, Linda's on the call. Hi, Linda. Linda, do you want to come up and talk a bit about this Facebook page? Because I'm part of that Facebook page and it's amazing. Is Linda here? Are you happy to talk? Hello, Linda!
Good thing I'm not wearing my jammies today. Yeah, it's a great support group on Facebook called Mentoring Women in Archaeology and Heritage. And it's sort of like an informal support group that you can join on Facebook, where you can ask questions, anything that you struggle with. And they've helped me as well in the past. And they do have the webpage that I put a link up to, where they have more different people with different specializations that you can formally contact if you need more advice in a certain area. So it's not like super formal mentoring, but I would highly recommend it if you even just to hear about different issues that people encounter that you might encounter yourself. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Linda. And I did put you on the spot for that, but I didn't. So
glad I got dressed somewhat.
Good work. And there's a couple of comments here about mentoring in the chat box. So like Sheena, hello Sheena. I think more people would like to mentor, who would like to mentor would feel more confident if support by a service of some sort. So that's a really good point, making sure there's structures in place to perhaps support mentoring going forward. And there's a clear idea of expectation from both parties about what is required and what is needed for the mentorship to be a success. And we've also got Mark here says, I think it's worth saying mentoring is not just about old to young, it's about experience, supporting less experience. And Mark's also saying, I'm always here open to offering support for people new to the sector, museums and heritage. I think that's a really good point as well. And I'm a certain step into my career, but I still benefit from mentors, and I still get mentoring throughout my career. So I just don't think mentoring ever stops. It shouldn't ever stop. We've got a question here from Sarah. Sarah, do you want to come on and ask it? Or